Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. My name is Josh Treese, and I'm coming to you from Music City, USA, with the podcast that takes a look at relationships and mental health through the lens of movies, TV, and pop culture. This week's guest is Dr. Kevin Hull. I met Kevin earlier this year when we were office neighbors, and we ended up grabbing a bite for lunch. That was when he pitched me his take on Order of the Phoenix for an episode, and I know you guys are going to love it. So, let's not waste any time and jump right in. Dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
But I like to start every show by asking my guest why therapy.
Yeah, I knew you were going to do that, and I spent a while kind of having to walk through that because it didn't just come to my mind as easily as I thought it would. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Sarah Hopkins said something that really resonated with me on one of your past episodes, and it was basically I wanted to do something where I got to have important conversations every day. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
Was that Sarah?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And when I heard that, I went, huh.
And I think part of hers was when she started her undergrad, she took a psych class, and it was like the only class she liked.
Yeah. For me, I went back to high school because I was always sort of socially awkward. I still can't really do small talk. I get bored, I zone out, and I seem disinterested. But in high school, I found myself having these like really deep conversations with people. And it was kind of the first thing that ever worked for me socially was people kind of bringing their stuff to me.
Were they other high schoolers?
Yeah. If I existed during the instant messenger days.
Oh, yeah.
I still kind of get excited when I hear that little door creaking open sound. Before then, I was on my way to being a pilot. I always had this like affinity for flying.
This was high school?
Yeah. Up until 9th grade, I was preparing. I'd already picked out a school. There's a school down in Florida called Embry-Riddle. I was going to go there. I was going to become a pilot.
Wow.
But once I started having...
Had you flown anywhere up in... Like, why? That's another podcast. Why pilot?
Why pilot? For whatever reason, I had a knack for it.
Huh.
I used to play these flight simulator video games and stuff, and everybody else would be like, can't get off the ground, and like without even like doing the tutorials, I could take off, fly wherever I wanted to go, and land.
Okay.
And like, oh, this is easy. This is natural. I was good at it. But once I found a way to connect to people, I was like, this is better.
I'm so curious. Like you said that you started having these conversations, and if I'm hearing you right, like it was your like you found your way to connect.
Mm-hmm.
Like when did you become awake to that? Because and what do you think it was that made people comfortable coming and talking to you?
I wouldn't have been able to answer that question, I don't think, 10 minutes ago, but it was, I think, 10th grade year when we were doing yearbook signing. And up until then, I basically had empty yearbooks. I'd have like a couple people like...
Have a good summer.
Yeah. And in 10th grade, I started getting, I don't know if this was a thing at your school, the like corner to corner, like essay type signings. And it felt so good. I was like, oh my goodness, what changed from last year to this year? And a lot of it was I was helping people sort of through their painful stuff.
Wow.
For whatever reason, whatever I did helped me to be a safe person that people could share things with.
Huh.
And as a result of being able to do that, I had friends. And I to this day kind of remember that feeling of, holy crap, when did I get friends?
Yeah. And I suppose, especially in high school, if you're safe with one person, they might say to somebody else, yeah, he's a great person to go talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So you discovered this superpower. And then how did you go from a high school kid who likes having important conversations further?
Well, at first, I was pointing and aiming towards being a youth pastor. When I became active with my church once I started doing this. I was like, okay, if I can do this, maybe I could take on more of a leadership position at church. And that worked. And I started getting people who I was close to through that. And we went on this camp and had one of those sort of like super emotion filled kind of things.
Last night at camp. Yep.
Yep. And I was like, I think I'm supposed to be a minister. I think I'm supposed to connect to people and help teenagers with their pain so that I can use my experiences in middle school and early high school to help others. And so I started figuring out what I needed to do to get to seminary to become a youth pastor. And I knew, okay, I'm going to have to go to a college and get a 4-year degree so that then I can go to seminary and get the master's in divinity or whatever at the time. And so I went to this little school in Georgia called Berry College, and I had this amazing intro to psych course. I can't even remember the name of the professor, but I loved him. And I was like, no, this is what it's at. This is what it is for me. And also I was meeting people that normally I wouldn't come in contact with in the context of like a church. And I was like, I love these people, and I can't do life where I don't get a chance to enter into this kind of world.
Mm-hmm.
I need a broader reach, and I need to have an opportunity to connect with people who are super different from me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what made psychology and counseling the thing that I was drawn to.
So you're at Berry College.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming studying you like on that track.
I was actually majoring in psychology because my youth minister, when I was in high school, first majored in psychology and then went on to seminary. So I was like, I'm just going to do what he did.
Yeah. I'll match that template.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to switch directions at all.
Mm-mm.
You just kind of leaned more into it.
Exactly.
I like that.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Leaving the undergrad, because I kind of feel like, at least in my experience in meeting people, that there's a couple of majors in undergrad that are like catch-alls,
Mm-hmm.
like communication, political science,
Mm-hmm.
and I think psychology can be one.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you kind of narrow it down even farther? Like once you got the undergrad in psych,
Mm-hmm.
did you know how you wanted to practice, who you like your population? How did you go further than that?
Well, at the time, I was pretty convinced it was going to be teenagers. And I was partially right, but I thought I was exclusively going to work with teenagers. And so that's kind of how I envisioned that. The problem is I had no idea how to go from a bachelor's in psychology to having a hurting teenager in my office that I could talk to. That the pathway to get there, at the time at least, wasn't super well laid out. So I tried some things. A lot of things didn't work. And I got an email in my spam folder that I just happened to check from Lipscomb University. I'd never heard. Actually, I had heard of Lipscomb because I think I'd just seen like their basketball team play, like in the NCAA tournament or something. I was like, huh, that's interesting. And so I opened it up and I saw that it was a counseling program that was kind of rooted in some Christian principles. I was like, cool. And so that day I applied, got the interview, and like called my parents and said, so this is a thing. And we ended up driving up to Lipscomb like 2 days later.
Where are you from?
I'm from just outside of Atlanta.
Okay. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Which could be any part of Georgia at all.
Yeah. It's a little town called Conyers.
Oh, yeah.
We are famous for the Lost Boys of Rockdale County, which was all about syphilis.
Yes, I watched that. They showed that in one of my youth ministry classes in undergrad.
Of course they did. And we're also famous. My high school, actually, there was a school shooting right after Columbine at my high school. So those are the two things that Conyers is kind of most famous for.
And you.
Yeah.
3 things now.
We also have, the dude from 30 Rock, Jack McBrayer, is from Conyers.
Oh, cool. Kenneth, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. So Lipscomb. So when you were at Lipscomb, I remember in our program, it was literally like our second class where somebody came in and they were like, you need to start thinking about your specialty. You need to start thinking about where you want to. In fact, if you haven't applied for an internship already, you're a little bit behind.
Oh, wow.
In the second class. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where the bathroom's at. And you want me to like narrow down my focus. What do I? So in the program, because you came in thinking, okay, it's going to be teenagers. Where did you go in the program to get to where you're at now?
That's a hard question. This is so atypical of me at the time, and it's kind of typical of me today. I just kind of went with the flow. I took whatever courses were laid out in front of me. I leaned into it. I've tried to find ways to love it. But I really didn't have a plan. At the time, I was also working full-time as a case manager, which is basically a person who goes into people's homes and helps connect them to resources. And so I've got a full-time job that I feel super unequipped for. And then at night, I'm going and taking these classes. And so I'm basically just trying to keep my head above water. I didn't really have much space to think about the future or what that might look like.
Wow. So what is your, you went from grad school, you have a PhD now.
Yes.
So like, how did you, what was that process like? Because I'm interested in getting a PhD. So how did you end up with a master's and then going, all right, next?
Fear. I got almost to the end of my master's in psychology, and it would have been where I would have rolled over and done like the counseling requirement stuff to where I could become a licensed counselor. And I locked up. I was like, I'm not ready for this. I don't know anything. I don't know how to talk to people. I don't know if somebody was in my office and says, I have depression, I wouldn't know what to do. And so I just went, I can't launch yet.
Wow.
And so at the time, it was either I completely pivot and go a different direction, or I go do more school. And so I had heard a little bit about that there was a PhD program at sort of a school similar to Lipscomb. Trevecca and Lipscomb are pretty similar programs. And so I reached out and went and sort of asked some questions about the doctoral program at Trevecca, and like, all right, I'm going to try this before I kind of give up and realize that I can't do this.
Wow.
And so I enrolled in the Trevecca PhD program. At the same time, I got laid off from my job as a case manager. And so I took a job waiting tables at a little breakfast place in town called J. Christopher's. So I enrolled in the Trevecca PhD program and went, okay, hopefully something in this journey will click and I will get some sort of confirmation that I'm on the right track and I can do this.
Did it?
Yeah, maybe. I think what ultimately clicked was I don't have to be enough in order to do anything. I just kind of have to go try and take a risk.
Well, I would say that you are enough. You don't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not so much about do I measure up. It's
right.
Do I love, am I passionate about this? And do I pour my energy into it? If both of those things are true, then like you said, I am enough.
Yeah.
I don't have to figure out, am I smart enough? Do I have the social skills? Do I have enough techniques? Do I have to memorize all this stuff? It's not about something inherent within me necessarily. It's, am I chasing something that matters? And am I investing in it?
Well, and are you able to truly be with someone?
Mm-hmm.
I think that I identify with that a lot. 'Cause for me, my ability to feel safe is oftentimes rooted in how much I know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if I sit with a client and they're, say they're presenting symptom as something that I've never worked with before,
mm-hmm.
My first inclination is always, all right, let me go grab a stack of books.
Yeah.
Let me read everything and then figure out what the right, quote unquote, right way to help this person is.
And one of the best things that happened to me is as I was going through my dissertation process, at some point I ran up against my limits and I couldn't keep going on my own because I had sort of hidden behind I'd always been seen as the smart kid. School came easy to me. I didn't really have to try that hard. But at some point, that all failed and broke, and I had to find a different way to do life that didn't involve hiding behind just outthinking life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was one of those, I was forced to be vulnerable. I was forced to come face to face with, you know what, this isn't working anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when that shift happened, to where before I was going to be the expert. I was going to be the guy who knew it all. That was going to be how I was going to help people. And when that failed in my dissertation process, I also surrendered that in my counseling practice. And that's when I went from being totally burnt out and I was doubting, is this for me? To just filled with energy, because all of a sudden I became effective.
Yeah.
What I was doing started to work because I was connecting, and it wasn't so much about what I knew, it was about the relationship.
Yeah. That's something that I came to at some point in my internship, and still like revisit all the time now, is realizing that all of that stuff that I said before about like feeling like I need to know all of the right quote unquote ways to do it, is just realizing that that's about me.
Yeah.
That's not about the client. That's what helps me feel safe. So how do I help the client feel safe? And then just, at some point in school, they said the therapist's best tool is the therapeutic relationship. Just the relationship you develop with your client. And so I just had this epiphany one day that, well, if I am with a client and I don't know what to do, then all I have to do is be.
Yeah.
I just have to be with them, and that'll be enough, because that relationship is what we as therapists keep going back to. And so it's still something that I find, I'll slide a couple steps back and have to keep reminding myself now that, I don't need to know everything about something. I just need to be.
Yeah. One of my telltale signs is every now and then I'll slip back into that, and I find myself talking a lot in a session. I'm like, oh, this is me trying to fix things. And fortunately, I've developed a much better awareness of that, and I just sort of pump the brakes, and I'm like, all right, I need to get back into a state of just being curious. And
do you feel like there's something inside of you, he asks because he knows this about himself, that like maybe like you become like something got a little too close in you, and so you back off of the feelings and go to psychoeducation, and then
yeah,
that's me.
Go into sort of like attachment style. You have your anxious attachment style, your secure attachment style, your avoidant attachment style. Most of the time, I think I can honestly say that I'm secure. But when I get destabilized, I go hard avoidant.
Yeah, same.
I shut down, block out, withdraw, and I intellectualize. And that's how I keep,
because it makes you feel safe.
It does.
Yeah. I think this is the kind of stuff that's good to talk about, especially on the show, because, we as therapists, we don't have it all together.
Right.
Leigh-Ann said that somebody at her work found out what I did and said something along the lines of like, oh, I bet he gets everything right. And I was like, you told him, yeah, right? And she said, well, the trick is it's just that he's aware of all the wrong things. It doesn't mean that he doesn't do them. But yeah, I mean, all of us have, well, I can't say all of us. We do our own personal work as well.
Oh, every day.
And so it's not, in fact, I said to somebody the other day that a lot of times a therapist's population has some tie to them. Rarely is it just they opened up a random page in a textbook and was like, that's interesting. I think I'll center my career around that.
Yeah, and for me, it wasn't even a conscious choice. I didn't decide to see people that had a tie to me. One day I just looked around and went, oh my goodness, almost all of my clients have a tendency to hide behind intellectualizing. I have lots of engineers.
Oh, cool.
And I mean a lot of engineers as clients.
Yeah.
And I didn't do that on purpose. It just kind of naturally happened.
Well, that leads us to something, and I feel like this is something new that I've started asking, is like, what does your practice center around?
For me, a lot of it is just people who tend to overthink life, to overanalyze, and tend to cut off their feeling and experiencing and even sensing self and center everything around their thinking mind. And so a lot of what I end up doing is helping people to step outside of their thinking self, to get beyond some of those defenses and begin to experience life. It's almost like waking up.
Yeah. Kind of a red pill moment.
Yeah.
With the Matrix.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm trying to think, I guess. I mean, that seems like a similar situation when you were in high school. It seems like you get one engineer, you get one person who felt divorced from their heart, and you help them reconnect.
Yeah.
And if they know somebody else that's similar,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I got a guy. You should see my guy.
Yeah. I love the voice of the heart. When you said divorced from your heart, that's what that made me think of. That's a brilliant resource just to help you to, we tend to devalue our feeling self. We tend to devalue the heart, and we tend to try to turn ourselves into production, almost like robots, where we are what we produce, we are what we create, we are what we can do. And that's just not a great way to live life.
Yeah. I know that you and I, we grabbed lunch one time, and I was asking you about your PhD. What did you do your PhD work in?
A lot of it was on sort of counselor identity development, and it was based on what I was struggling with. I said before that I experienced a lot of burnout. I mean, looking back at my early career, I can think of several seasons where I was just utterly burnt out. And also, I was super enthusiastic at the time, so I took on lots of trauma and lots of really complex cases. And so I also found myself getting almost traumatized by doing my work. And so I was a mess, and it was causing problems in a lot of different areas of my life. And so I wanted to learn what kind of factors can help counselors to grow in a healthier way. And one of the first things that started working for me was I reconnected to my church, and I reconnected to my faith. And that helped me to stop feeling like I had to be the person to fix everybody. That wasn't ever what I was supposed to be. At least the other person needs to be the person who fixes their own stuff. And at best, I surrender that to God. And approaching that with some humility and almost embracing my original Christian values again helped to ease the pain of kind of losing my intellectualizing defense mechanism and embrace just being a person who cares and a person who is, above all else, a human being.
Yeah. I always say you got a bad case of being a person.
Yeah.
So what was your, I didn't realize this until I was in, you and I were in the same graduation ceremony. I didn't realize it until I was in that ceremony, and during the doctoral, the PhD graduations, they put up everybody's title to there. And I was like, everybody has a paragraph for a title.
Oh, please don't ask me the title of my dissertation.
Yes,
because I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. I think it was Counselor Religious Practices and Attachment to God and How It Relates to Professional Identity Development.
Boom.
I don't think that's perfect, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah.
So essentially I was looking at if we do some of the Christian practices, go to church, read the Bible, pray, volunteer, act for the betterment of the less fortunate, can that protect us from burnout? Can that help us to be more empathetic? Can that help us to be more authentic and real in sessions? And also, I looked at just how does a person see their relationship with God? Are they anxiously attached to God? Are they constantly trying to seek validation from God that we're good enough, that we're okay, that we're measuring up? Or are we avoidant to God? Are we keeping God at a distance? All right, gotta believe you, but you stay over there and then I'll do my whole life thing.
Oh, that's interesting. Because we've talked a lot about attachment theory on the show before, but never in relation to a person's attachment to their higher power.
Yeah. I mean, there is a pretty strong correlation between attachment to God and just attachment to others, but it's not one-to-one.
Yeah.
It is a different relationship.
Did you have any part of your research that examined, like, as people were coming up, or maybe just even in your work you found this, as people are coming up, because we learn attachment from our parents. Like our
Mhm.
attachment style comes from our parents.
Yeah.
Did you have anything that kind of showed how do people learn their attachment to God? How do they develop that style as well?
I mean, a lot of it is we kind of project onto God our earthly relationships. So, I mean, more often than not, if we have a anxious attachment with others, we're more likely to have an anxious attachment with God. But it's interesting. Sometimes it's the inverse. If we have an anxious attachment to others, that means we're trying to let others validate us, and we're constantly seeking them. And so, since God's not others,
Mm-hmm.
we tend to keep God at a distance because he doesn't quite measure up to the high we get from when we feel validated by another person.
Yeah. I would imagine that stemming from like because it's an intangible thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's almost like an immediacy when we get that
Yeah.
affirmation from a person because they're
Yeah.
in front of us.
Exactly.
Huh. That's interesting. Um, how how does that shake out in your work today? You mentioned a lot of your clients tend to, I would say, over intellectualize, but kind of get stuck in their head,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they need to kind of drop down to get to their heart. Uh, when they come in, do you talk about their spirituality with them? Do you talk about it as a tool, a method of self-care? Like, how does
Mm.
that come into your work?
A lot of it very much depends on the person. I can usually get a read pretty early on whether a person wants to go that direction or not. I never force that upon another person because,
Well, ethically, we can't.
well, yeah, and
yeah.
also just that runs against my values.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody talks about God pulling them through a tough time, or they talk about praying and things like that, I will ask if I can have permission to ask more about that and to talk more about that. And it's almost always a very enthusiastic yes.
Interesting.
Occasionally, there's some religious pain there that
Yeah.
might prevent somebody from really wanting to go there, especially early on. But yeah, I do find that it can be super enhancing to my work when I get to go there.
Yeah. There's like so many things about what you just said that I like. The first thing is asking permission.
Mm-hmm.
The retail job that I left not too long ago, the part-time retail job I had a method of engaging with a person that they called position permission probe. And so it was, you tell somebody why you're going to ask questions.
Hmm.
You ask permission to ask the questions, and then you ask the questions.
Interesting.
So that way it's not, because especially, if somebody is maybe buying something for one of their kids, asking out of the blue, how old is your child? Might seem a little, what?
Yeah.
Huh? So if you start with, hey, in an effort to help you pick out a better gift, I'd like to ask you some questions that may seem personal. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
You let them know, here's why I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking your permission to do it, and now I'm going to do it.
I like that.
And that seems like what you're doing with your clients.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, I think I'm picking up on something. Would you be okay if I ask some questions about that?
Yeah, I'll even sometimes references. These questions are going to seem like they're coming out of nowhere. I promise there's a purpose, and I promise I will talk about what that is. But I usually won't explain the purpose immediately up front because I don't want to kind of skew a person's answers to try to... A lot of people tend to try to conform their language and their responses to things to reflect who they want to be rather than who they are right now.
It's the old Pottermore quiz
Mm-hmm.
trap.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm going to answer because I know what house I want to be in.
Yeah.
Instead of what I really...
Yeah. And that's also honestly one of the reasons that I am highly skeptical of psychological testing and personality theory in general.
Mm-hmm.
I don't buy into much of that. I think it's a useful tool, but I will usually encourage people away from letting those things have any sort of identifying power.
Don't let them define you.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell clients, the results of an assessment, all that it tells you is based on the answers that you gave at this time of that day.
Yes.
Other people who give those answers typically look like this.
Yes.
And, I always let them know, your answers could come out one way if you took the test after you've eaten lunch.
Yep.
And feel rested. And
There's
they could
been
come
studies
out
on that.
Yeah, they could come out a completely different way. Like if it's you're starving in the late afternoon and you stayed up the night before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of people who kind of almost treat their personality results almost like a prison where, well, I'm an introvert, so that means I really can't apply for this leadership position because that's just not who I am.
Yeah.
Well, do you want that?
Oh, I'd give them Susan Cain's book, the Quiet book. I got done reading that earlier this year, and a lot of that book was concentrated on what introverts can bring to the table at leadership.
Yeah.
But I like what you're saying about, like, it's, and I think especially, we've talked about the Enneagram a little bit on the show. And I think it's a cool thing. Like, I'm still learning about it. But like other assessment types, I think, if we were talking a decade ago, we'd be saying Myers-Briggs. But other assessment types, it's really easy, especially for somebody who looks for that external validation, that external label that they can put on themselves to claim an identity. It's really easy to get an assessment result back and go, oh, sweet, so I am this, because it means I belong to this camp. Like, I have something, I have a handle I can grab onto now. And I almost wonder if maybe a better way to take assessments is to have people take it 4 times across different days of the week and across different times, and then have some kind of average. And even then say, hey, this is still just an indication, not a definition.
I look at them almost like taking your temperature. This is what your temperature is right now. But just because your temperature is 99.2, that doesn't mean that's what your temperature is. That's just where you are right now. Is that where you want to stay?
Yeah.
Or I'll have people look at other, I don't do a whole lot of personality testing just because it's not really how I operate. But if somebody will bring it in, I'm like, okay, so you're a 3 on the Enneagram. I get a lot of 1s. That's sort of the engineer mindset from what I understand.
Need to be an expert, yeah.
Yeah. So this is how you're currently operating. What do you like about it? What do you wish was different? Can you see things in some of these other numbers that appeal to you? And I try to empower them to realize that's not closed off to you.
Yeah.
It's not like you can't become that. It's not like you can't live life that way. This is just how you've always done it.
Well, it's like attachment style. I mean, when I first learned about it, and I was like, oh, I'm avoidant.
Yeah.
I remember raising my hand in Dr. Hopkins's class and saying, can a person change their attachment style? And she's like, yes, you absolutely can. I tend to think now, whatever your attachment style is tends to be your default. So like in your, non-thinking, when you kind of go into autopilot, that's where you end up. But as soon as your brain comes back online, you can move away from it.
Yeah, we never forget old ways of doing things. It's almost like you have this tool shed that has lots of different hammers in it. Some of them work great, but there's always that old splintery hammer that every time you swing it, it like slices your hand open. That without even realizing it, we'll go back and we'll look and go, oh my goodness, how long have I been using this old splintery hammer? What have I done to myself? Stop.
Yeah. I also, sometimes with my clients, if I can hear them, like they're on the cusp of a thing, and maybe I realize, I need to give them some words. I don't ever want to like just have a declarative, like Dwight Schrute, it is your birthday. I don't ever want to do a thing, like that. So a lot of times I'll say like, hey, let me say this. I think I'm picking up on this, and I want you to tell me, I want you to try it on and tell me how it feels on you.
Yeah.
How it fits. Does it feel like something that could fit? If not, let's put it back. Let's keep moving. But
yeah, I love that. I think we can sometimes get a little overboard with our reframes, our interpretations, and we can sometimes miss the actual person because we've kind of developed this imaginary person that we think we're dealing with. and we can almost exclusively relate with that rather than the physical person who's sitting in our office.
Oh man, the idea of someone rather than the someone.
Yeah, anytime I work with couples counseling, or couples in counseling, I will invite each member to come to terms with that they're married to two people, their actual spouse and their imaginary spouse, and to get in the habit of noticing who are they reacting to. Are they reacting to the actual person, or are they reacting to their imagined other?
Oh, have you ever heard of a movie called The One I Love?
Mm-mm.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to do an episode on it. I don't know with who. Maybe it's the one that I'll do. It has got oh gosh, the woman that was in Mad Men, Elizabeth, I can't remember her last name. And then the guy that was in The League. Clearly I'm great with names right now.
Yeah.
But it's basically
Mark Duplass is the lead guy.
Yes, it's him. So they see a therapist. Their therapist is Ted Danson. And as an intervention or an exercise or something, he says, hey, I've got this cabin retreat. I want you guys to take a weekend. I want you guys to use it. Go out there, just have a married weekend. So they go out there, and one of them enters the house by themselves first. And inside, they find the idealized version of their spouse. And so they interact with them, they have time, and then when they come back out, no time has passed. And the other person goes in, and it's the idealized version of the other spouse.
Interesting.
And so then the conflict of the movie is, do they want to stay in the house with the idealized version of their spouse, or do they want to come back out with the real version?
Oh, that's so cool.
And actually like work on, because they're in conflict. That's why they were in therapy. But like, do they actually want to work on the relationship? And it's a really interesting
Yeah. I
story.
love that. And it sort of hits to the heart of the beautifully broken concept and the fact that perfect is not good enough and good enough is not perfect. If something is perfect, then it doesn't have those uniquenesses that make life beautiful. That, yeah, sometimes a person's brokenness is frustrating, but it's also deeply connected to what makes them beautiful.
It's like a house that seems like people live in it.
Yeah.
My favorite, which I'm probably pretty basic by saying this, but my favorite Leonard Cohen lyric is, ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering, there is a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in.
I got chills.
Which Switchfoot, John Foreman wrote a song where the light gets in, like based on, it was on I think 2 albums ago, based on that lyric. But
That's
yeah,
awesome.
it's and I think I identify with that in my story too. Like I look back and there's definitely things where if I had the chance to do them over differently, I might choose something different. But I've also made peace with my story, and I know that I wouldn't be sitting here with you today if I hadn't have gone through the things I went through, because they were transformative. It was like a crucible that caused me to seek something.
Yeah.
You know? And so even in my present state, those virtues that I have, those deficits that I have, they make up who I am as a person, to where, you know, even though I am a work in progress and I'm a continually changing, you know, developing person, I wouldn't be the same person that I am without those things. And so, you know, Leigh-Ann's husband might be different. Like, you know, my clients might have a different therapist, you know, because all those things make up me.
Yeah. And imagine being that therapist. I went to a training with, I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Kelly. He's one of the authors of the acceptance and commitment therapy model. And he did this exercise with us where he had us imagine that we had no pain and no problems and no failures. And then to imagine...
John Lennon song?
Yeah. But then to imagine a child that we adore, a child that we love coming up to us in tears going, this has happened and I don't know how to deal with it. And imagining looking at them and having no idea what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine having to just go, oh, that sucks, but I think that's just a you thing. I can't imagine what that must be like.
I feel like it might actually shake out to where you would end up giving them advice. Like that person would be a head person.
Yeah, here's what you should do.
Yeah, and you would say, "Oh, I know the answer to that problem."
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that not maybe that a child doesn't need an answer.
Yeah.
A child needs a hug.
Our brokenness is what allows us to connect.
Yeah. Yeah, when you were saying that, the first picture I got in my head was Data from Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Oh, yeah.
Like just walking up to Data and being like,
Mm-hmm.
This has happened. Oh my gosh, I'm so broken apart.
Mm-hmm.
That is an easy solution. You should,
Exactly.
no contractions and
Yeah.
Well, let's talk movies.
Cool.
So, what movie did you bring today?
So, I say movie. I'm probably going to fall into the trap of talking about the book because I'm one of those annoying people that says the book is better. But I'm bringing to get today Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, first off, I don't know a case of a movie being better than a book, like
Lord
across
of the
the
Rings.
board. Really?
Oh, yeah. Have you read those books?
I have read those books. I would go with you on nope, wouldn't go with you on The Hobbit. The Hobbit movies were terrible. Yeah, I think I might say with those the movies are equally enjoyable. I don't know about better.
Well,
A different experience.
it helps that I didn't particularly enjoy the Lord of the Rings book.
There you go. Yeah, I read them on a balcony in the Bahamas, so that probably helped.
Sure.
So Order of the Phoenix, and I think with those, I remember when I first got into Game of Thrones, I watched season 1 first, and then I read the book.
Okay.
And then before season 2 came out, I read the second book, and I watched season 2.
Huh.
And what I ended up finding from that experiment was I like watching before I read because it fills in all the gaps.
Okay.
Versus if I read first, all I'm thinking is, well, they left that out. They left that out. That's different. That's different.
Sure.
Because it's like the book becomes canon.
Yeah.
And the movie becomes whatever else.
That's a good point.
So we're going to fill in some gaps. That's okay. We can talk back and forth between the book and the movie.
Yeah. I did watch the movie twice before coming in here because I wanted to try to submit that as what comes first into my mind. But I think I've read the book probably a dozen times, so that's not going to be super successful.
Yeah. Harry Potter, I mean, I think, how old are you?
32.
32. Okay. I'm 38. So I first remember learning about Harry Potter, I think when Half-Blood Prince came out. Because, I mean, at that point, I was like out of college. Like, I think I was in my first year of my job.
Yeah.
And so I kind of missed the whole, like, youth part of Harry Potter.
Sure.
So for me, like, I remember going to some bookstore with a friend when they bought their copy of Half-Blood Prince and be like, what's that? But I think that it's something that's tied to so many people's, it's not just a book. It's not just a movie. It's like an intimate identity, nostalgic experience for a lot of people. Like Leigh-Ann, Harry Potter is intimately tied up in her psyche to the point where last Christmas we gave her mom a complete set of the books and she started crying. Like, we just had a new nephew back in April. He already has a set of the books that was given for him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just this part of childhood almost now for people.
Yeah. Honestly, when I was thinking about what I wanted to bring here, I had to struggle a little bit to have the courage to bring this.
Really?
Because I love your show. I've listened to a lot of episodes, and I'm like, man, all these other therapists are bringing like these like human kind of like real world, serious-ish kind of stories. And what's it going to say about me if I bring like a kid's story? I'm like, I think I love what it's going to say about that.
And also, I don't think that this is any less. I don't think it's a kid's story. I mean, I think that.
Well, to me, Harry Potter is, in my opinion, one of the masterworks of literature, like almost of all time, in my opinion, because of how relatable it is, how approachable it is, and the story that it tells is so powerful,
Yeah.
and in the ways it touches on just the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
It's brilliant.
I watched a video on YouTube on a guy's channel called Nerd Writer One, and he talks about Prison of Azkaban, the movie,
Yeah.
and specifically about how it's a place where third movie in the series, but it's like it's a turning point
Mm-hmm.
in the series where all of a sudden you see that darkness get introduced.
Yeah.
And his point was, and he talked about that's not just the story, but it's also the filmmaking and how
Mm-hmm.
it's the first movie that Christopher Columbus didn't direct,
Mm-hmm.
but Alfonso Cuarón came and did it.
Yeah.
And he talked about how um, the thing with the Harry Potter movies. I couldn't think of a word, so I inserted the word thing. That's where I'm at right now. The thing with the Harry Potter movies is the story grows up with the people reading it.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people who picked up that first book in their childhood, as they're getting older, the themes of the story, the struggle, the conflict, the decisions, the choices the characters have to make, they are growing up along with the reader.
Right.
And how, you get, and it probably is in Prisoner of Azkaban, you begin to get introduced to these gray areas
Yeah.
in the story where all of a sudden it's not just about black and white, it's not just about good and evil, but good
Yeah.
characters are making decisions that aren't really the best. And,
Exactly.
then there's Snape, who is basically a gray character.
Yeah. One of the most perfectly great characters ever created.
Yeah.
Like, he never resolves. Not fully.
Mhm.
And that's amazing to me.
Can you do a good thing for a bad reason? Can you do a
Yeah.
bad thing for a good reason?
Yeah.
I think that's the essence of Snape.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it about Order of the Phoenix? Because we got 8 movies.
Yeah.
So what was it about Order of the Phoenix that made you want to talk about that?
It's interesting. It's probably the book that I most dread because it brings out the most powerful emotions in me. Because Order of the Phoenix contains within it sort of 4 unique, almost archetypes that mean a lot to me. There is within Dumbledore, for example, who is to me just the most brilliant example of a man at peace, a person whose heart is not going to be sacrificed because of the circumstances around him. He is the wise mentor in the story, but he's kind of the person that I want to be, and he's the kind of person that I want all leaders to become.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have his antithesis, and that's Dolores Umbridge, who is probably the character I've encountered in literature and in media that brings the most strong anger reaction out of me. Because she is about depowering. She's about wanting to tie a person's happiness to their safety and security. She's anti-risk. She's anti-truth. She's controlling, using people's fear. And she's using that to exploit in order to achieve more and more power. She is the villain of the Order of the Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the victim that I pity the most, and that is Tom Riddle, or Lord Voldemort. He is a person who has become so avoidant that he has sacrificed his entire humanity because he can't tolerate the discomfort of death, and he can't tolerate the messiness of relationship. And so he just said no to all of that stuff.
That has an interesting tie. If we did a Family Feud and we said name a famous fictional villain, top 2 answers, Voldemort and Darth Vader.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them had that same that fear of and desire to stop death.
Mm-hmm. Avoidance is powerful.
Yeah.
On the flip side, acceptance is even more powerful. And that's where you get Harry.
Mm-hmm.
Harry is the literary character I most relate to. And honestly, I think that's because he is written to be inherently relatable. It's hard to miss Harry. Just about everybody can see a little bit of themselves in him. And so seeing his journey from early in the movie kind of struggling against his pain, struggling against his ideas of himself, his loss, his everything, and to watching him as he accepts that. It's one of the more powerful things I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what's interesting about this place that we find him in this long story that's being told, well, one is that he is the audience surrogate. So
Mm-hmm.
He's our entry point into the story, which I think helps in the relating thing, because I remember in some conversation with Leigh-Ann, I think she said at some point, well, she always imagines herself as Harry, but also that's who the perspective is being told from. So kind of duh. But at this point in the story, we're 5 movies in. Is this 5?
This is the 5th.
Yeah. So he's not the outsider in the world not the same kind of outsider that he was anymore, like the newbie discovering everything anew. He's got a little bit of a handle on magic. Like, he knows some spells.
Yeah.
He knows some things.
But that even comes across in the tone. It's almost like he's jaded early on. In the first 4 movies, Harry's all...
There's
one of the things I
wonder.
love is there's awe and wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And he loses that. And a lot of that is he's traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
He just went through seeing the murder of a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens to us, we kind of retreat within ourselves, and we lose that sense of awe and wonder, and we trade that in for security, protection, things that honestly keep people away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why you see the tone of the first half of the movie. For me, it's all about isolation and loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
Harry's cut off, and Luna Lovegood's character is one of my favorites. I adore that person. She even points that out to Harry at one point when they're talking about the Thestrals. If I was Voldemort, what I would want is for you to feel cut off and alone, because when you're cut off and alone, you really can't do much. But when you're connected to people, Voldemort's going to be scared of what power that represents.
Yeah. And I think the biggest way you can see that isolation in the movie is his relationship to Dumbledore.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, in this movie, he's in kind of a gray spot, because you're right, he has lost that awe, that wonder of the magical world. The movie also starts in the Muggle world.
Yeah.
And so you see this kind of convergence of those two worlds, I think for the first time, in the way that Harry has both worlds inside of him, and he's existing in one while being a part of the other. Because pretty much up until this point, the movies start in the Muggle world, and it's him getting out of that so he can get to the magical world.
Mm-hmm.
But for the first time in this one, in the Muggle world, he's able to express a part of his self, that magical part of his self, in that Muggle world as an intentional action, or I guess maybe a reaction, but to stop the Dementors from attacking him and Dudley.
But notice the ramifications of that. I think it's so interesting. And I think this parallels into a person's journey in overcoming trauma. So the Dementors in the story represent despair.
Mm-hmm.
And the spell that Harry cast to sort of cast away the Dementors is the Patronus charm. And what it is it's a sort of manifestation of our hope, our power, our joy. And as he casts
it's like the happy thought from Peter Pan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But notice, as the moment he does that, the world further cuts him off. He's reprimanded from that. He's accused of something totally unfair. Mm-hmm. And even the scene right after that at the Dursleys' house, I think it's so brilliantly portrayed. It's almost like the proportions of the house are weird. And I think that's deliberate. But you have Harry, who's just gone through this terrible thing, who's by himself, and it's almost like you can see the body language of the Dursleys to shun him, to cut him off, as they wrap themselves around their biological son.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. This is Josh, and I'm interrupting the episode to ask for your help in getting more people into the theater. I'd love to see Therapist Theater make a dent on the iTunes podcast lists, and the best way to do that is by giving it a 5-star rating and writing it a 5-star review. You can do that now by visiting the show's page in the podcast app. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks so much for helping spread the word about Therapist Theater. Okay, back to the show.
And then, immediately after that image, you get the owls. You're expelled. You're cut off.
Was that Umbridge's voice in The Howler that came to him?
So this is where my knowledge of the book and my knowledge of the...
Watch it again today, like just that one part. I think it was Umbridge's voice.
Yeah. It's supposed to be, oh boy, I'm about to reveal my Harry Potter nerdness. It's supposed to be a lady named Mathilda Hopkirk.
Oh, maybe it is.
She's the person who's sort of responsible for like the clerk of the Ministry of Magic.
Yeah.
She's the person that Hermione impersonates when they break into
yeah.
the Ministry in the last movie.
Yeah.
I think that's who it is because I think it even signs itself as Mathilda Hopkirk.
Okay.
I
Maybe
could be
it
wrong.
Sounded like Umbridge to me, but yeah, you're right. So he does have this moment of expression of like his true self, because he's not saying I'm Muggle or I'm magic. He just in the moment he just is himself, and then that causes both worlds to go, nope,
Exactly.
you're not with us.
And I can't tell you how many times I've worked with someone who's been traumatized, and they take those first steps of reclaiming their power, of reclaiming their true self, and their family almost wants to shut that back down because they're used to kind of the sick and broken version, that the empowered and stepping into their full self, it's uncomfortable for them. It's almost inconvenient for them.
Yeah.
And so there's a tendency as we get better, as we heal, as we step back into our power, sometimes there's a tendency for our community to react unexpectedly to that.
Yeah.
And it can sometimes make us feel even more isolated, which unfortunately will sometimes cause us to retreat back into that state of despair, because at least then I'm not fully alone.
Yeah. So this is an interesting concept, and I always try to like touch the ground with anything we talk about on the show. But like the area of my study coming through grad school was systems thinking, and it feels like what we're describing right now is the concept of homeostasis.
Yeah.
Can you like speak to that a little bit about like what is that? You know,
that's gonna have to you. That's gonna have to be you, my friend.
Okay.
I'm an LPC. I have
right.
no systems background.
Okay. So systems are the relationships that we exist in as people.
Sure.
Primarily, when we talk systems, usually we're going to end up talking about your family of origin.
Okay.
Your mom, your dad, your siblings, and the family you grew up with. But another system could be you and your group of friends. Another system could be you and your coworkers. Another system could be you and your softball team. Like, these are all systems. And each system has a unwritten set of rules that govern how it works, and everybody in the system has agreed upon these rules, whether they realize it or not. And so in the movie, you know, the magical world has a set of rules that govern it. In the movie, the Dursleys have a set of rules that govern it. And homeostasis is the concept that in a system, any change to the system will then try to correct itself. And so in like family counseling, if a family of 4 come in, they're going to come in and one person will be what is called the symptom bearer. So there's an issue going on with the entire family, but 3 people in the family are looking at one of those people saying, well, if they just did this or if they just stopped doing that, everything would be great. They're the symptom bearer. So whatever that issue that the family has is, it's manifesting itself, or at least the family believes it is, in one individual.
Yeah, sort of the scapegoat.
Sort of the scapegoat, yeah. Like if we're looking at Virginia Satir's kind of model, that would be, they're the person that everybody needs to look to and say it's their fault so that nobody else has to bear the weight of that.
Yeah.
And so homeostasis is the symptom, you're pointing at the symptom bearer. So if the symptom bearer were begin to change, if they begin to do their work, if they begin to, then all of a sudden you're going to see things show up in somebody else, because the system needs somebody to point at in order for it to exist. So homeostasis is the system itself trying to right itself again. It's become off balance. If you remember that game when we were kids called Topple, where it was like a little stand in the middle and a board, and you put these like checker looking things on it, and you were trying to make it become unbalanced. That. Yeah, that's homeostasis. Is it would be if that topple board was constantly trying to correct itself. And so in this case, Harry and his expression of his true self, it throws off homeostasis of the Dursleys and the magical world.
Yeah.
And both sides try to right it. Because like Mr. Dursley's like, you got to get out of here. Like, I'm tired of, that kind of thing. And the magical world is like, oh, nope, you crossed the line. You broke a rule.
Yeah.
You're expelled.
You've made us uncomfortable.
Yeah. Which that's really what it is whenever one part of the system changes, it causes the other parts to get out of autopilot.
Yeah. And
to examine what's really going on. And with some people, that's possible. But with others, it may be the first time they're doing it. And so they're like, oh, nope, oh, I don't like, nope, let's get back to the autopilot thing. You think about in the original Matrix movie, Joe Pantoliano's character, I can't remember his name. But he's like,
I want to get plugged
back in. I want to get plugged back in. I don't want to be aware anymore.
Yeah.
And because my practice centers around addiction, like that is a typical, I do have some clients where when they start becoming aware, they start feeling their feelings. They're like, oh no, this is actually the opposite of what I want. Yeah.
Sorry if this was you who came up with this, but I think it was one of your past guests came up with something that I've used quite a bit. I'm not here to help you to feel less. I'm here to help you to feel better.
Yeah, that was Todd. Todd Wormers said that on the last Samurai episode.
That really resonated with me. And I was like, yes. Because I do something called acceptance and commitment therapy. That's my core modality. And of course, the acceptance piece of that is such a hard sell. Because a lot of people come into therapy and they're like, I feel anxious. I want my anxiety to go away. And I go, yeah, but do you really?
Or they may want it to go away without addressing what is the origin of it.
Yeah, and sometimes what we can best equip people to do is to be able to sit with an uncomfortable feeling, because often that's what it takes in order to live life on purpose. If we're constantly living avoidant of something uncomfortable like anxiety, then most of the meaningful things in life must not be approached, because we feel most where we care most. And so moving towards something that matters is going to bring that anxiety up. But that's evidence of something going right, not something going wrong.
My therapists that I saw as a client, the model that they used was that anxiety was not a feeling in and of itself. That anxiety was the degree to which you felt your feelings.
Okay.
So they would always kind of probe a little more. If I said, I'm feeling anxious, okay, tell me. So they would start with like, what feelings are you feeling and what is your anxiety level? So if I said, well, today I'm feeling sad and angry, and my anxiety level, the degree to which I'm feeling those, 1 out of 10 is a 6, is a 10, is a 7, is a 3, whatever. And so for them, if I ever said I'm feeling anxious, they may say, oh, tell me what's behind that anxiety. Tell me what is contained within it. Well, I'm feeling afraid about this. I'm feeling lonely about this, that kind of thing. That's just, that's one model. It's one way of looking at it.
Absolutely. It sounds very similar to like emotion-focused counseling. Letting your emotions be like signals that you can listen to, but first you kind of have to get past those secondary emotions into what is the primary feeling. What's at the core of that? And more often than not, you'll find fear just sitting right there.
Yeah, I think people have a really tough time with fear.
Oh yeah.
I think the root of all fear is some element of feeling like you don't have control or influence.
Yeah.
and grappling with that,
Mm.
and the natural desire that surfaces to take that back in some way or another.
Yeah.
So Harry expresses his patronus.
Patronus is what I call it.
Okay.
I think that's pretty consistent what it's called.
Did they call it that in the movie, or do they call it a patronus?
I'm pretty sure they
I'm
called it a
willing to do
Patronus.
the rest of this show in a fake British accent if I need to.
Yeah. Maybe it is Patronus in America.
Well, he does the thing.
Yeah.
And expresses, by the nature of what that spell is, expresses hope, expresses joy, and to a certain degree, at least for Harry, expresses sadness, because for him, that is ultimately tied to, the losses that he's experienced.
I never thought about the presence of that particular emotion, but you're totally right, because most of the things that are connected to Harry's sources of joy have within it sadness as well.
Mm-hmm. Which jives with what we were just saying about emotion focused, because sadness as an emotion is really a spotlight.
Yeah.
Whenever you feel sadness, it is shining a spotlight on something that you love. And so you can't feel sadness about something without having loved that thing,
right,
or that person, or that relationship, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an indication that you're capable, and it's an indication that that really mattered and still matters to you. So that's kind of our introduction into homeostasis and gray and, Harry expressing his true self and all that. But carry me further into it. Like, tell me more about why this movie? Because I know that the first time that we had lunch, you expressed really clearly why you wanted to talk about this.
Yeah. A lot of what initially drew my attention was the contrast between Umbridge's approach to people compared to Dumbledore's approach to people. I referenced before that Dumbledore to me is kind of the epitome of a man who's at peace. Even when he is trying to influence others, he does so from a place of peace. He doesn't criticize. He doesn't he condemns, but he does so calmly, and he does so in a way that is always seeking to empower. He's not trying to control. He's not trying to take away somebody.
You don't think Dumbledore gets a little manipulative around this point of the story?
Manipulative in what way?
Like the whole towards movie 7 or 8, where everybody kind of realizes that he knew Harry had to die. Spoilers, I guess? Should I say spoilers for Harry Potter? For the two of you in the world that haven't read it yet, pause.
We've kind of already spoiled Snape. So.
Yeah, pause, go back, engage with the entirety of the story, and then come back, I guess. But they know, he's known that Harry's got to die for a long time, and it's been a constant kind of chess game of moving Harry into places.
Sort of, but there's something that he tells Harry in book 6 that resonates, and I think that is at the crux of what keeps
Half-Blood Prince?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where Harry says, "Well, I have no choice," and Dumbledore goes, "Stop. Of course you have a choice. Just because you're the quote unquote chosen one, that doesn't mean that you have to do anything. But think about what matters most to you, and think about why that stuff matters to you. Even if you were never declared the chosen one, even if none of this other stuff was going on, what would your heart tell you to do?" And so, at the crux of everything, Dumbledore does some manipulation of circumstances, and I think he's a master at that. But I don't know if I'd agree that Dumbledore manipulates people.
Okay.
Because if he does, I think he would probably see that as a self-betrayal. And that is kind of what happens in the Order of the Phoenix, is Dumbledore betrays himself to some degree by keeping his distance from Harry because he's scared. And notice how quick he is to own that. Yeah, I was scared. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't fully understand it. And I wanted to protect you from feeling something that I didn't think you could handle. I am sorry.
Which, going back to our conversation in Why Therapy, that's about him. That's not about Harry.
Right.
That's about Dumbledore can feel safe because I care about Harry so much. If something were to happen, I
Yeah.
don't know if I could deal with that.
Yeah. And the fact that he's able to come to terms with that and own that is what makes me admire Dumbledore so much throughout the series.
And I can see now when you're saying that part from Half-Blood Prince, why Dumbledore is that character to you.
Yeah.
Because what he's doing, like Amy Alexander says, he's giving Harry back to himself. He's highlighting in Harry, you have what it takes to make not you have what it takes to get this done.
Mm-hmm.
You have what it takes to make this decision as to whether or not you want to get this done.
Right. Whereas you see in Umbridge, the exact opposite of that. Umbridge is, you know nothing. You're not good enough. You're not an expert.
Do as you're told.
Do as you're told, and shut your mouth. And her use of fear to reduce freedom is something that really grates at me, because at my core, what I want to do and what I want to see in people's lives is empowerment. And when people give in to fear, what they're also almost having to do at that point is to give away some of their power, to cut off certain choices, to close down certain roads, because I can't go that way because I'm too scared, because this might happen, this might happen, this might happen, what if this, what if this, what if this? And to have somebody who actively manipulates that to control, it's appalling to me.
Yeah, I think watching the movie over, I think one thing that she uses as a tool, I get this visual in my head when she shows up at the school, and you see it in the Great Hall where Dumbledore is like introducing, as he does at the beginning of every year. We got this new person. We got that new person. New defense against the dark arts, that kind of thing. When she shows up, the vision that I get, the visual is she's like one, red dot in a sea of green. And then as the movie progresses, the more influence, not influence, the more authority that she takes, that red dot grows until eventually towards the end, it's a sea of red and you have a few dots of green in it. Because she rises from being, the newest teacher. And even in that moment where Dumbledore is introducing her, she like clears her throat and gets up from behind the dais and walks out and gives her own speech, which you can kind of see his mouth is open a little bit like, what are you doing? I am the headmaster. You don't.
Yeah, the book even says, doesn't she know that this isn't how things are done here?
Which is funny because I think that she would probably say that line a lot about the ministry. That's not how things are done. This is how they're done. And then as it progresses, she begins to assert more and more authority, kind of homogenizing, like what you said, it's taken away the freedom. So it's taken away I'm going to use the word diversity, but I mean like individual expression of everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone has to look and act and be this one way. Because that one way is right.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
And what that does just to the atmosphere of that wonderful place, it's appalling. It's horrifying. And for the first half of the movie, you see almost a defeated Harry who is just resigned to, the best I can do is take it and try not to make things worse.
Like when he's writing
Yeah, I must not tell lies. And then Hermione has an idea that changes everything. And that's when we go from Harry, who is sort of cut off from his heart. He's a little bit subdued and he's been kind of quelched to some degree. He steps outside of his comfort zone and he begins to teach people defense against the dark arts. He takes on a leadership position that he felt unqualified for and unprepared for. And it's the tone shift in the movie. And whether I'm watching the movie or reading the books, the meeting where they form that club gets me excited. I'm sort of getting like tingles here talking about it, because that's when Harry begins to reconnect to his purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he comes to life. And notice that's also when...
But not his purpose as the chosen one.
No.
His quote-unquote destiny. But
Yeah.
just really it's his passion. It's his...
Yeah.
I see something that I think is wrong, and I'm driven to change it.
Exactly. And essentially that is his purpose, is I stand against the things that are unjust. I stand against the things that aren't right. And so when he starts to live that fully, two things happen. He comes to life. I mean, in the first parts of the movie, he's irritable, he's short-tempered, he's subdued, he seems like half of himself at most. But once he starts doing that, he starts talking faster. His voice becomes richer. His facial expressions are more emotive. And the second thing that happens is he's all of a sudden surrounded by people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
In the first half of the movie, you almost see like there's a ring of separation around Harry.
Oh, especially in the trial. Is it a trial?
Yeah.
In the trial, and it's not until you see an above shot
Yeah.
from top down, but you see almost like a dividing line in the room, and all of these red robes and the few black robes of the people
Mhm.
that are like on the council or whatnot, and then Harry by himself on the second part of that circle.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's away from him.
And so that is the power of purpose. Because once you find one, it doesn't have to be like this grand, my life's purpose is kind of thing. But once you find a purpose and you start chasing it, and you kind of let go of both the fear of this might go wrong or the fear of I'm not qualified, and you start just living life on purpose, all of a sudden you'll look around and you realize, without even trying really, I'm now surrounded by a community.
I think in my head I wanted to ask you, do you think it's possible to find a purpose without finding your true self?
Oh,
But
yeah.
I think those two things are tied,
Yeah.
because I think you might arrive at a passion or a purpose first, and it
Mhm.
helps develop and bring out the true self. I think if you're one of those unicorns that connects with your true self,
Mm-hmm.
in a total and healthy way at the beginning, then that could help bring out that other stuff too. But
I think there's two ways of going about it, and I greatly prefer one over the other.
mm-hmm.
I think there's a inward approach to trying to find yourself. Sometimes I talk about this as it's almost like navel gazing. You're kind of looking down and you're withdrawing within to who am I? I've got to figure this out and then I can start living. I'm not a huge fan of that approach because I'm not quite sure there's anything there to find.
Lent.
Yeah. My philosophy is we find ourselves when we start living and we start trying things and we figure out what works for us and what doesn't. It kind of goes back to when you asked why therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's what worked. I didn't sort of soul search and go, I am clearly built to be a therapist. No, I was trying things.
That feels like what you said about Harry and Dumbledore's conversation.
Mhm.
Harry thinking, well, I'm the chosen one, so I don't have a choice, like a
Yeah.
destiny.
Yeah.
Whereas he really did. What you were saying, like, it's not like the only thing you could have been was a therapist.
Right.
It's that in your walking forward and being willing to try this, try that,
Mhm.
succeed, fail, this was something that when you tried it on felt great,
Yeah.
like it fit, and you decided to stick with it.
Yeah. I don't think that that's necessarily a reflection of who I am or who I was at the time. It's just that's what my choices and circumstances ended up leading to.
Do you think that it shaped you,
To some degree.
choosing to stick with it? And I mean, if you would have chosen to stick with being a pilot,
Mm.
do you think you would have come out a different person?
Maybe. One of the tenets of acceptance and commitment therapy that I love is the idea of treating the self as context, not content. We tend to treat the self as something that needs to be analyzed and understood. But again, that kind of leads back to figuring out who I am first. And it doesn't often work all that well because we are so fluid. We're constantly changing. Treating the self as context allows us to go, okay, what matters most is what I am about. What are my values? What are my purposes? What are my goals? And then allowing the self to be molded to fit that. But it involves a whole lot of choice.
Do you think in that model there is such a thing as a true self, or is it more of an evolution? Like well, let me rephrase that. There's such thing as an absolute true self, or is the nature of your true self that it is going to change as you go along?
I think there is a true self, but I think it's super undefinable. When I talk about the true self, what I usually am referring to, I can't remember who coined this. I want to say it was Eckhart Tolle. And he talks about the watcher behind the eyes. The true self is the person that has been with us, who's been us, honestly, from the time we first developed consciousness. It's unchanged. Yeah, we've developed new skills, we have new assumptions, we have different ways of thinking, but none of that is a reflection of us any more than our clothes are a reflection of us. I mean, yeah, we have our style, and sometimes our clothes reflect that. But ultimately, there is this purely unique self that lies within all of us that it's super hard to define because it exists beyond words.
Mm-hmm.
To put it in religious context, it's sort of the imago Dei, the image of God self. It's just this almost indescribable, uniquely, wonderfully made self that any attempts that we do to try to pin that down and go, okay, this is what this is who I am, it's going to fall short.
Mm-hmm.
We can't do it.
Yeah, I mentioned some time ago, I think, that a really tricksy therapist question that a therapist asked me one time was like, who are you? I'd say, oh, I'm Josh. No, that's your name. Who are you? Oh, well, I don't know. I'm a whatever I was doing at the time.
That's what you do.
I'm a barista. No, that's what you do. Who are you? I'm John and Penny's son. No, that's your parents. Who are? And it's a really I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think it can be shaming, but it sounds like something along those lines where it's like these are all associations. These are all things that maybe we've tried to grab onto.
Yeah,
but they're not us.
I use the metaphor.
That does feel really mindfulness. That like a detachment kind of.
Yeah, and it can be super empowering. I use the metaphor in sessions a lot. It's almost like imagine you're going to the beach, and for whatever reason, you've decided that your entire day at the beach is going to be defined by your sandcastle ability. And so, what do? You build these sandcastles, and these sandcastles are super important to you because they're somehow defining for you. And then you realize that the tide's coming in. So, what are you going to do? You're going to go frantic, and you're going to try to stop the tide coming in somehow. You're going to lay down in front of it.
You dig a moat. That's what. Yeah, of course.
And then the moat gets filled in, and then it starts to rain, and then you realize that all these things ever were sandcastles. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of did that, but that never defined me. And once you let go of this notion that I am a sandcastle builder, then you get to look around and you realize that there's an entire beach to experience and play in. Yeah, you're not going to be able to say, I am this, but you're going to have a much better experience.
I want to talk more about umbrage because I think when you originally introduced the idea to me of her being the antithesis of empowerment, which I don't even remember when that was. That might have been like back in April, but it just continued to roll in my head after that. And when I was watching the movie, of course it's got to load the page again. I went to Pottermore and looked up her characters page, and it's got some concept sketches, and it says the very first quote on the page was something that struck me when I was watching the movie. In the scene where she and Hermione and Harry go into the woods because they are telling her they're going to take her to Dumbledore's secret weapon, and they encounter the centaurs.
Yeah, I'm afraid the Ministry of Magic values my life much higher than yours.
Well, it's that, but it's also when, one of them fires an arrow at her, and she screams out,
Filthy half-breed.
Mm-hmm. So and she says something to Harry. She calls Harry a half-blood in that same part.
Hmm.
The very first quote on her page on Pottermore is that she is a half-blood witch
Hmm.
who is a sinister ministry bureaucrat and one-time Hogwarts teacher. And as I watched the movie, what I experienced with her was there were several times, and it was when when she was most afraid,
Hmm.
that she would shout these things that were just gross and filthy, and it made me think, I wonder if the control that she is exerting are things about she's trying to get rid of externally around her, things that she doesn't like about herself.
Sort of the concept of the superiority complex.
Yeah.
Because deep down, I truly feel not good enough. I'm going to consciously adapt and adopt this mindset of superiority. I'm going to believe I am better than, so that I can feel good enough.
Well, but even carrying it one step further, like when I was saying she was that, one red dot in a sea of green, and she made it to where there was a couple green dots in a sea of red.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, I'm going to adapt, but it was, I'm going to get rid of in the environment these things about me that I don't like. So she's shouting at the centaur, half-breed. She's shouting at Harry, half-blood. She's changing the way that students can behave.
Mm-hmm.
She's getting rid of aspects of the school that she doesn't like. And then as I'm going down on the Pottermore page, she was in Slytherin. When she was a student, she was in House Slytherin.
I guess I shouldn't be so surprised by that. I was kind of expecting her to be in some other house.
Yeah. It says that her Patronus is a cat. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
Her parents, Oxford Umbridge, which was a wizard, and Ellen Cracknell, which was a muggle, so half-blood. And it says next under skills, her punishment quill, which towards the beginning when Harry has to write, I must not tell lies, as he writes on a piece of paper, he first asks, I need an inkwell or whatever. She says, you don't need one. He starts to write, and as he writes, it is carving into his hand the words. Her punishment quill is of her own invention, it says. So she invented that. And then underneath that, it says hobbies, collecting the quote-unquote frolicsome feline ornamental plate range, adding flounces to fabric, which I don't know what a flounce is, and frills to stationary objects. And then the third hobby, inventing instruments of torture. So what struck me was that there is a river running, there's an undercurrent to Dolores Umbridge that maybe her true self, really is, or at least an expression of it, where she's trying to present one way on the outside. She's trying to make her environment another way on the outside. Where on the inside, I think to what you expressed earlier, she's consumed with fear and
shame. I guess that's almost like toxic shame.
The half-blood part is probably feeding into that, Which I thought Harry isn't half-blood. Like, both his parents were wizard.
No, his mom was Muggle-born.
But she was still a wizard. Or
But
a witch.
that's still half-blood.
Oh, okay.
A pure blood is a purely...
so like the Malfoys, like just the whole line.
Yeah.
Kind of, okay.
There's really no interspecies?
Interbreeding is what my mind is coming up with, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to be incest. That's the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was what she shouted at the centaurs. Oh, and it was also, there were several times where you could see genuine fear, like when Fred and George decide we're out of here, and they do the whole, prank in the Great Hall and all this, and then they set off that one firework that creates the giant, firework dragon, and it starts heading towards her, and you see this genuine fear, and she turns around and she starts running, until it like snaps on top of her, which it's not tangible, so whatever. But and then in the forest as well, when the centaurs confront her and she, I don't know, sends a rope out or whatever it is, like that ties one up.
And of course, that's her defense mechanism, is to restrict, to take away freedom of movement, to incarcerate.
Express control.
Yeah.
Which I think, I mean, I've had, every one of my clients, every one of them has been a person. And
that's probably a good thing.
it's natural, yeah. I was going to say I've had several clients, but it's really been all of them that when they come in, fear comes up at some point or another.
Oh, yeah.
And there's always at least an initial attempt to wrestle back control.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the consequences to that are greater than others.
Yeah, I try not to have too many like agendas as a therapist that I have preset in my mind. But there are two that I kind of want to accomplish in the life of anybody who comes into my office. I want to help people to be able to tolerate and accept two things. The one is that we have very little control over our circumstances. There are things we get to control, but most of those are within.
Mm-hmm.
We can influence, but we can't control.
My therapist always said, you have control, total control from your skin inwards.
Yeah, somewhat. I don't think we can control our thoughts as much as we'd like to.
Yeah.
But the other thing that we have got to, those are usually that's usually a bad word for me.
Yeah.
One of the other things that we benefit from being able to do is accepting uncertainty. Because I read this in a Psychology Today magazine, and I loved it. It was certainty at best is a delusion. But notice how much additional and unnecessary suffering that we do trying to achieve certainty in life. I need to know. I need to know for sure. But none of those measures ever produce certainty.
Mm-hmm.
They produce lots of worry and lots of pain, and it's almost a detachment that comes from that. But it doesn't accomplish anything truly of worth.
Yeah. And I think that bleeds over into so many other areas. And I'm thinking of times in my life where, you know, maybe I was dating somebody and there was a breakup, and I always wanted to know more about why.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wanted to figure out, you know, if I can just talk to them again and convince them.
Yeah.
It was this unwillingness to accept there was going to be a change.
Yeah, the quest for certainty is one of the main drivers that keep people looking backwards.
Yeah.
Because if I can figure out why I felt pain then, I can make certain that I won't feel that pain again.
And that made me think about what you were saying about Voldemort.
Yeah.
And Darth Vader as well. It's this
fatal flaw.
Yeah, it's this unwillingness to grieve. It's this unwillingness to feel pain. It's this unwillingness to feel hurt, sadness, and this constant quest to find an absolute way to never feel it again.
Yeah. Very rarely when I'm either reading or watching Harry Potter do I hate Voldemort. I pretty consistently pity him. I feel sad for him because he was a person who had such great promise. He could do things that nobody else could. The only thing he couldn't do was learn to accept.
Do you think that that's because my brain immediately went to he didn't have the people to come alongside him to show him the way, but he almost had the same people that Harry did. Like,
Bingo.
Dumbledore came to him.
Yeah.
So if it's not that he lacked the external influence,
he made different choices.
Yeah. Which I think is that's one of the things that Dumbledore highlights to Harry later on.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even in this movie, because Harry begins to wonder, am I turning bad?
Right. For me, it almost goes back to in the second movie when Harry starts to think that he is descendant of Slytherin and should have been put in Slytherin to begin with. And Dumbledore finally asks him, but why weren't you put in Slytherin? And Harry sort of got depressed and says, it's only because I asked to be put in Gryffindor. And Dumbledore goes, and that's what separates you from Voldemort.
Mm-hmm.
When presented the opportunity to seize power and to live life defined by ambition, you chose to go a different path. Voldemort made a different choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like what you're saying about not hating him through this, because what book was it where they began to explore his family?
That's the Half-Blood Prince.
Yeah, because you see, like, how his mom and biological father came together
Yeah.
and conceived, and how that, even the family that his mom came from, and theirs was a family. Oh, that kind of relates to Dolores Umbridge as well. I was going to say that was pure blood, but they weren't. Like, Voldemort wasn't pure blood, and he
Right.
hated that about himself. And,
Right.
and it looks like Umbridge hates that about herself. But
Right.
you see this almost desire to rewrite that history, to make it to where, they were, or at least nobody questions it, to where you just can pretend that it doesn't. It's not really a thing that exists. But going back to like systems thinking, like that's questions that we would want to ask is, tell me about your mom and your dad. Tell me about, are they still married? How did they get together? And as you do that, did you ever have to do genograms in your...
In undergrad, I
Okay.
had to do it for, I don't remember what class that was. But no, it's not a tool that I use.
Yeah. So like now I do a genogram with every client, not formally, like I don't have them step up to a whiteboard, and although I did do that in my internship, but like it's just a way of trying to see, are there patterns that show up transgenerationally? So
do you remember all those symbols? I couldn't keep them all in my
I
head.
have the book in my office, but also I maybe make the symbols up, like, because
Okay.
it's just for it's I'm not turning it in for a grade now, so like I don't have to get it right. I just have to do it to where I understand it. So if I put a triangle where a circle's supposed to be, nobody knows. It's fine.
And so genogram's like a complex family history that examines relationships, and I always compared it to diagramming sentences.
Ish. I mean, so because I do it informally, I'm really doing like a family history intake interview. And as I'm doing it, I look at it more as my way of remembering names and relationships.
Oh yeah, I don't even try to remember names.
Uh-huh.
I do remember relationships.
Nice.
But not names.
So what I'll do is I go 3 generations back. I start at the client. I go to their parents and their grandparents on both sides. And there's been times I remember with one client, and this was the first time in my private practice, I remember it because of this, that I felt like, oh, I know what I'm doing. Just doing the genogram, I could see emotional cutoff in his family of origin.
Yeah.
And that came out because once I said, tell me mom and dad's names, tell me brother's name, tell me what it was like in the house with these 3 people growing up, he said, we never had family dinners. Every night the food got put on the kitchen counter, and we each got plates and took it to our rooms and ate with the doors closed in all of our rooms.
Yeah.
And this was a client that was coming in for addiction. And I was like, oh my gosh, nobody ever showed you how to do relationship.
Right.
So how could you know?
Exactly.
And so, you look at in Half-Blood Prince where they begin to tell you Voldemort's family history and this like self-hatred and this desire to change the story and adapt the environment and take control and take authority. And it makes sense in the context of his system that he came up in.
I think one of the key differences between the system that Harry had versus the one Voldemort had is Hagrid. Hagrid was Harry's first introduction into the magical world. And Hagrid he's sort of an outcast. He's looked down upon. He's marginalized by a lot of the more, like, powerful voices. And when Harry
Dismissed?
dismissed is a great word for that. And so when Harry first has that opportunity to realize, oh no, this guy's awesome, and somebody tried to tell him otherwise, that didn't match his reality. It's like, what are you talking about? I love Hagrid.
That's
He's
a
great.
great sense of self. He develops an idea, an external force comes in and says, no, that idea is not right. And he goes, yeah, it is.
Yeah. This is my experience. I trust my experience.
He trusts his gut.
Yeah. That's both for the better and for the worse.
That's a big quality of Gryffindor, it seems like, too.
Yeah.
Trusting your gut.
And notice sometimes it backfires on him. But if he had experienced one of those backfires and went, well, gotta stop trusting my gut, then we would have no story.
Yeah.
But he was able to go, yeah, I trusted my gut. It didn't work that time. but I'm going to keep trusting my gut because that's who I want to be.
Yeah. One of the things you just said about Hagrid reminded me about something you said about Harry earlier. Hagrid is a character that I would describe as being extremely comfortable with himself. Hagrid likes himself. He likes the things that he likes,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't change
Right.
no matter who he's with. What, be it animal or be it person, he
Mm-hmm.
is just Hagrid.
Yeah.
And I think whenever Harry encounters that, Harry sees that authenticity, and he gravitates toward it, and
Mm-hmm.
he likes it. And I think what you said earlier about whenever they form Dumbledore's army and he begins to teach Defense Against the Dark Arts, and he begins to express his true self more, a crowd of people gathers around him. And it's that same, when you're being your authentic self, people are attracted to that.
Oh, it's magnetic. It's amazing.
And that's something that, I've said to somebody before, whenever we meet people like that in real life, well, at least for me, I always walk away from time with those people feeling energized. I always walk away feeling seen,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like whenever somebody is comfortable in their own skin, they're comfortable with who they are, they're more able to be present.
Right.
And I hope I can be that person. I don't know if I think I have more moments now when I'm more comfortable with myself than others.
Mm.
If I look back over my history, more of that is showing up now. And I know I still have room to grow, opportunities to grow. Do you think that there's anything that a person can do to help bring that out more in themselves, to connect with themselves more, to where they can be more of their, in other words, how can Josh be more Josh? How can Kevin be more Kevin? How,
Two things just instantly popped into my head, so I'm going to go with them.
Let's do it.
The first was letting go. Letting go of the things that we're trying to force into existence. Because what that causes us to do is to become preoccupied. If I need to be seen as the smart guy, then that means I need to keep thinking about the smart thing to say, which means that I'm now turning inward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not able to be outward focused. And the other thing is mindfulness. Valuing just being fully present, but being present in a non-judgmental way. Experiencing and appreciating rather than evaluating and analyzing.
Sounds a lot like that acceptance thing you mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just taking it for what it is.
I like to joke with clients when they first come in to see me that I essentially do 3 things. And that's about it. But I can spend a lot of time trying to make those 3 things happen. And it's acceptance, mindfulness, and values work.
Yeah. But, I mean, those 3 things, I always go back to a quote that I heard from the TV show House.
Love that show.
It's simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah. I say that a lot.
Yeah. And I think it's like, I remember when I heard that, it dawned on me, because there were so many things in my life at the time that I was going through that I would approach thinking, well, this looks easy, and then find out, oh no, it's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy.
Right.
And in House's context, it was, it was him encouraging his ex-girlfriend to decide between her husband and him. It's a simple choice because it's only 2 choices, but it's not easy.
Right.
Because there's so many layers of things you've got to get through for that. But, I mean, even those 3 expressions of things that you said you do, simple. 3 things, not easy.
No.
Yeah. And you could spend a lifetime of work therapeutically. I mean, in essence, that is life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you are going to spend a lifetime.
Sort of the lifelong tug of war game that we play.
Yeah. I was talking to a client the other day about the values thing, about what would it look like to be able to begin to identify values in your life, not things that you like,
Right.
not things that you're attracted to, not things that you have done or that you don't want to do again, but rather what are values that you have, and what would it look like to begin to orient your life towards expressing those?
freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else from the movie that stuck out to you?
Oh, I mean, we could take another hour.
I mean, we could do a whole podcast. Actually, that would be a good spin-off podcast is Harry Potter.
and mental health, Harry Potter
Yeah.
and counseling, yeah.
A therapist takes a look at at Harry Potter.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would ever run out of things to talk about, to be honest.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to cover on this episode?
No, I kind of like where we land.
All right. Well, let me ask you this, because this is something new that I've begun asking people. What is something that you have learned from your clients?
There's so much. I think the crucial lesson that has sort of helped me to transform my life is that I don't have to be an expert in order to be of worth.
I'm just going to let that ring for a second. Tell me more about that.
Well, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about before, where I thought that my self-worth was wrapped up in what I knew. And when I had clients who came in and they knew things, I almost found that to be a threat. Like, well, what do you need me for? But when I found that I could still be of value, and honestly, there was some direct conversations where I would tell clients, I don't feel like I have anything to bring to you. And when they talked to me about what they got out of being in a relationship with me, I went, none of that has to do with what I know. None of that has to do with what I went to school for. What am I? And it came back to, I'm a person who connects.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing. I'm willing to go there with people. I'm willing to lean in when others might lean away. And so my willingness is more defining of me than my knowledge.
Yeah. It sounds like I had a similar epiphany. I remember being in my internship at the counseling center, and Dr. McCurdy came in to do like a group supervision.
Mm.
And he has this chart that he draws to explain his worldview. And it's this like, holy cow, a human came up with this. I can't even believe it. And I had this epiphany at that moment that the master's degree is really just the key that gets you access to the library where the real learning starts. Like, you get the master's degree and you graduate, and then that's when you start. It's almost like they're just trying to restructure your brain so you can really start learning.
Yeah.
And so for me, that shook out because that epiphany I talked about earlier, where I realized the therapeutic relationship. So if I don't know what to do, just being is enough.
Yeah.
That came at the end. The thing with Dr. McCurdy came at the end, which was great for that to come at the end, because I had spent so much of the degree thinking I've got to soak in everything that every professor says, because if I don't, it's life or death, and I'll never be able to help a person ever. And then just to realize, oh, they've given me the gift of having now a clinically trained gut,
Mm-hmm.
and to have access to resources that I can use if I need, but to really, both clinically and I think just personally or humanly, just be with.
Yeah.
And I love that your clients have they given it to you, or have they just held up a mirror and said, you've had it this whole time?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
I can think of a few like specific things that a couple of clients have told me that I think really helped me to like smack me over the head with it. But yeah, a lot of it is, it's going to sound odd, but my clients helped me to feel safe enough to acknowledge that I am not just the product of my learnedness.
Mm-hmm.
That
You're more than what you know.
exactly.
Wow. I feel like that's something I needed to hear today.
Cool.
Thanks.
Of
I
course.
appreciate that, yeah. Well, let's say that there's been somebody who's been listening that just feels like, wow, I feel like I could really connect with him and I would love to see him as a client. How can they get a hold of you?
The easiest thing to do would be to look me up on Psychology Today.
Okay.
Pretty soon that would be the only way to do that. I have aspirations to one day create a website, but I don't have space right now to do that.
Yeah. I think do what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an email they can email yet?
Sure. It's my initials, KMHULL 21 @gmail.com.
That'd make a great instant messenger name.
I think it was my last instant messenger name.
Nice. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being on today.
Oh, this was fun.
It has been an absolute pleasure. And I'm serious. If you ever want to do a podcast, I'll help you get it going on Harry Potter.
Yeah. One of my dreams is to do a podcast one day. I just don't know what I want it to be about.
There you go. Well, now you got at least one idea.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Hi, my love.
Hey.
I feel like we're experimenting over the past few weeks, recording the wrap-ups at an earlier time than like 11 p.m. the night before. And I got to tell you, I'm happy with the results thus far.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that I gain an extra layer of charm after a certain hour at night that I don't have during the day. I don't know if that's true.
How much of that do you feel like is related to you wearing your pajamas?
A lot.
Yeah.
I feel a little extra magic in my pajamas,
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like when you put on your pajamas, you can do no wrong. Or you can just do a little extra good.
That's true. I don't recall ever seeing a suspect on the show Cops that was wearing pajamas.
Yeah.
I saw lots of shirtless ones.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But none, usually they were wearing like jeans or jean shorts.
Mm-hmm. Jorts.
Jorts, as the kids today call them, yeah.
Or
as John Cena calls them. But I've never seen a criminal on Cops that was wearing pajamas. Nobody ever robbed a bank wearing a onesie, is what I'm saying.
That's actually probably not true.
That I'm aware of.
Yeah, I'll Google it.
Okay, give it a googs.
Okay.
So I was really, really, really excited for you to hear this episode.
Yeah, me too.
This is like the perfect intersection of so many circles in a Venn diagram for you.
I know. You've been talking about Venn diagrams a lot on the show.
Big fan of Venn diagrams. Big fan of Venn diagrams.
You told him that what did you tell him? Was that him? You said something about how I will point out when you say things for several shows in a row. Venn diagram is one that's been coming up recently.
Yeah. That was him, but I actually edited that part out because I didn't want it to be so repetitive. Yeah. Because I think I've said it in other episodes.
You have.
Yeah.
Well, now you said it in this one.
Boom.
You're welcome.
Nailed it. First off, welcome back from your fancy Lady Blazer business conference.
Oh my gosh, update you guys. I did wear the blazer. I got really brave one day and I just said, you know what? When in Rome, wear a blazer. And I did, and I gotta tell you, it upped my fashion, confidence, professional games 10 points each.
Did you feel the power?
I really did. I felt very powerful and very confident.
Wow.
Yeah, it is true what they say about a lady blazer.
So here's my
it's
idea.
Good.
You mentioned just a few minutes ago that you gain a level of charm when wearing your pajamas. Now you've talked about all these things when you wear a lady blazer. We got to get you a lady blazer pajama blazer.
I think
you'll be unstoppable. You could be elected president of these United States if you wore a pajama lady blazer.
No, I think I just need to wear pajamas under my lady blazer.
I like my idea better.
No, because nobody's going to know it's a pajama blazer.
I'll make it obvious. Barney on the show that will not be named had
How I Met Your Mother.
a pajama suit
I know. I remember.
that I really want.
Okay. I
And
didn't know that.
It was satin. Satin. I don't know the difference between those two words.
I don't either. I'm adding it to a list for you for
Boom.
gifts.
Boom.
I actually really am, though. I'm going to need 1 second to do that. All right.
So the Lady Blazer conference was good?
It was great. And thank you all for your support in my...
Thoughts and prayers.
Yeah. Thanks for your thoughts and prayers. I really felt it in that Lady Blazer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
Cool.
It was very fun.
Well, now that you've given us the update on the Lady Blazer conference, what did you think about Kevin's episode on Order of the Phoenix?
Oh, it was perfect. I would be a guest on his podcast talking about all of the Harry Potter movies and books and just Harry Potter in general. So cool and interesting to hear about it from this perspective. Like, he talked a lot about like Harry being like a picture of, oh no, I forgot what all the different things he said were, but like out at the beginning he's very like isolated and lonely and stuff like that. And anyways, it was just crazy to like think about it through that lens. So like one of the first things that I kind of remember from the episode was actually something about you. And it's that, like, when you guys were talking about, I think you got here from talking about him going to get his PhD out of being, you know, afraid of, like, once he finished his master's being like, oh no, I don't know enough, which I totally identify with. And then you ended up talking about how for you, you know, you find a lot of security in knowing what to do and in just having the knowledge that you need. And I just, when you said that, it just made me think about how one of the things I admire about you so much is that that's true for you. Like, you do find so much security and knowledge, but you're so good at, and like you literally do for a job, you know, sitting in a room with people telling you their stories and you don't know their story. Like, you don't know, you know, there's no like cookie cutter answer for every client and you don't treat it like that. And I think I just admire how you really sit with people and like meet them where they are. And it's almost, I just think that's so amazing. Even though you have this thing in you that wants to like have all the knowledge, that you're able to like sit in that and still just be with a person. I just think that's amazing. So great job.
Thanks. Appreciate it. I'm going to recommend now that they all get Lady Blazers.
I think that's very wise.
No matter what the issue is.
Yeah. I mean, it can't hurt. That's the thing.
That's true. Michael Scott wore a Lady Blazer.
Yep. And look at what it did for him.
Look at what it did for him. Seriously though, thank you. I appreciate that. It's very scary in those moments, but I think being able to recognize that fear isn't about the client, it's about me.
Yeah.
Helps me. I mean, when I'm having a good day and fully present, it helps me release that and just know that it's okay to not know and it's okay to be afraid.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. You guys also talked about attachment a little bit. I actually don't know where in the movie you got to it, like how the movie led you to attachment. But you talked about attachment styles, and Kevin referred to it as, like, you guys were talking about having your default attachment style. And he said he thinks of it like having this tool shed and you're using this hammer that's like all splintery, and then you realize that there's other choices. And it made me wonder, I just wonder how trauma changes a person's attachment style, and if maybe like if somebody can have a default attachment style, but then if they go through a trauma, I wonder if that can change their default attachment style.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to look at. I wonder if there's research about it. I would doubt that it would change it from avoidant or anxious or, what's the other one? Avoidant, anxious, and...
Secure?
No.
Oh.
I doubt that it would change it from one of those to secure.
Yeah.
I doubt that it would make it more secure.
Yeah.
You know, I would imagine it would go the other way.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what I was thinking of it like if somebody did have a secure attachment style, growing up or whatever, and then had a trauma happen to them. And then depending on what it is, I bet that it could change it. Just a little question for you guys to research if you want. Also, this is kind of back to like on the subject of it being Harry Potter. He mentioned after that he almost felt like embarrassed to bring Harry Potter. And I just wanted to say, I'm so glad he did. And like, absolutely not. First of all, Harry Potter's one of the best things that's ever happened to this world. And second of all, I just found it so fascinating to look at it through that lens. And third of all, you referenced my love of Harry Potter, so I thought that I would, and my mom's gift this last Christmas, so I thought that I would expound upon that a little bit. My mom...
Before you do that, disorganized is the fourth attachment style.
Okay.
Sorry. I just wanted to throw that in case anybody was hanging on the edge of their seat.
My mom, and one of the reasons that I probably love Harry Potter is that I connected with friends over it. Like, I went to the midnight premieres with my friends. I connected with my brother over it. Like, he's the one who read it first and got me into reading it. And it progresses as the books go on. Like, it's almost like her writing style gets more mature as the kids get more mature in the books, like as the characters get more mature. Anyways, whatever. I could talk for a long time about that. So my mom, my sweet mom, never read the books, but would drive us at midnight to the bookstore, my brother and I, to get the newest copies. And we would immediately go home and read it almost overnight. And it was just one of those things that she was so supportive of. And like, I don't know if anybody would identify with this, but in our town, there was a point where Harry Potter was out and people thought that Harry Potter was not good to read because it contained magic.
Yes.
And I just am thankful that my mom was always supportive of it and like supportive of us reading and our imagination and whatever. So she takes us to the book premieres up until we are, when did the 7th book come out? I don't know, but up until the 7th book, like we went to the midnight premiere of the last book too. And I think at some point between the 6th and the 7th, she decided to read them. She has reread those books so many times that now, like, to her, it's like a comfort. To her, it's like a nostalgia thing. And she didn't even start reading it until the last book came out. And so this Christmas, she wanted her own set because she has gotten Jeffrey and I sets. And so we pitched in together and got her one. And on the outside of it, I wrote, "Thanks for all the magical Christmases." And her face when she read that and when she opened it.
She held the books to her chest
and like
teared up and like fell silent for...
I gotta say, that's the reason that I think that gifts are one of my love languages. And this is a new discovery of mine. I think giving, it's moments like that they just give me life. And I just want everybody in their life to receive a gift where they feel like that reaction in the moment. So anyways, that's a little family Harry Potter moment.
There you go.
That I thought I would share. You guys you're talking about Harry being the chosen one. I think that you got here from saying how Dumbledore maybe, like you said that you thought he might be a little manipulative, and then you kind of got in a conversation about that. And then at some point you got to where Harry was the chosen one, but he still had a choice, and how Dumbledore would tell him, like, no, you still have a choice. And it reminded me of, if this is wrong, I'm going to feel terrible. But I think it's in the 7th book when Harry is like walking to his death. And he talks about understanding the difference between being dragged out, to, I don't know, for lack of better words, like to the arena, versus walking in with your head held high. And he has a moment where he kind of is like, oh yeah, I get it. And like Dumbledore got it and my parents got it and Sirius got it. So it reminded me of that, like that was the difference that Dumbledore was trying to communicate to him. Like, just because you're the chosen one, you don't have to, by choice, like end up here. You can choose. And he still chose, because of all the people he loved.
And I think in a very, real way, that is which we've talked about on past episodes, that's owning your story. That's integrating your story. And in a bigger way, that's like mindfulness because it's doing it in the present. So it reminds me a lot of like About Time, where, you know, he's choosing, I'm going to fully be present for this thing that I'm doing right now and choose it on purpose and do it for a reason.
And like in About Time, you know, letting his sister get in the car crash, like having a moment where he says, I have to choose this uncomfortable thing, you know, because of what it leads to, or just whatever, like, because like ultimately it'll be better. Anyways. So then the last thing that I thought about was when you guys were talking about Voldemort and Harry and how they have very similar, you know, backgrounds, and they have like basically the same people that are in their life, you know, for them to like to support them. But like Voldemort makes very different choices from Harry. And I thought about, I think in that moment, and this is what you guys were saying, like what would it look like to look at Voldemort with a trauma-informed lens? So instead of, you know, what did he do or what's wrong with him, the question then becomes what happened to him. And we talked a little bit about this before we hit record. Like he and Harry were both raised by, you know, not their biological parents. And they both faced rejection and like, you know, some harsh stuff from the environments in which they were raised. But I wonder if like one difference is that, you know, for Harry, his parents died. And for Voldemort, you know, regardless of the reason, from his perspective, it might have seemed like his parents gave him up. So maybe there was more of like a core rejection there. But anyways, I just like that idea of looking at Voldemort through a trauma-informed lens.
Yeah.
What happened to him that made him this way?
I mean, certainly it's a good example of how a person who goes through trauma can potentially, if it goes unprocessed, inflict that trauma on others.
Or is he just an evil guy, you know?
Yeah.
An evil wizard.
Yeah. We could ask J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
Have her on the show
Next
and
week.
see what she yeah. Tune in.
That's all.
So I already know the answer to this.
Uh-oh.
But Order of the Phoenix, rent, buy, or pass?
Oh, buy them all. Although I will say, I don't think it's the best movie of them all. It is one of the better ones, though.
What's
so
the
absolutely.
worst movie of them all?
The third one, absolutely, hands down.
Azkaban?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why is it the worst?
Well, I mean, do you really want to open this can of worms right now?
I want to open it for like a really short amount of time.
Yeah, I think I highly disliked the change in Dumbledore and the change in filming styles. Like, I know the directors changed. I didn't like the new style. Too much wasted time on the in-between scenes and not enough content. Yeah.
Well, the change in Dumbledore came because Richard Harris died.
I know that wasn't a choice, but there was a lot of problems with the new Dumbledore. Everybody knows that.
That's true, as evidenced the most in The Goblet of Fire.
Yeah.
I saw something the other day where it talked about kids who... there's like a group of people who Michael Gambon is their preferred Dumbledore. Because they saw most of them, you know, with him as Dumbledore.
I want to meet them and ask if they've read the books.
That's what I would want to know too. Yeah, I wonder if they.
He's just so opposite from book Dumbledore.
Yeah, I mean the choking and yelling at Harry. That's really the.
That's the pinnacle of like the difference.
Let me ask you this: what are you thinking about Jude Law as Dumbledore?
I gotta tell you,
Youngledore, if you will.
Yeah. I think I'm okay with him so far.
I want to know.
I think.
What is it that makes him go from wearing 3-piece suits
to the robes?
Yeah.
I think it's once his beard reached a certain length, he knew that at that point he could just get away with anything.
Cool. So it sounds like good episode.
Great episode.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and say that it's time to raise the lights, lower the curtain, and say that for this week, the theater is closed.